Hey guys, how you doing? In today's video we're going to be talking about some tips that you can use to improve your kill death ratio in Call of Duty Warzone. A lot of players get obsessed with this number, using it as the only way to determine their skill. But your skill is not down to your KD alone, especially with hidden, well, badly hidden, so let's just say not public, skill-based matchmaking in the game. I'm not going to get into SPMM in this video, but one of its major downsides is that it's really difficult to track your improvement, as once you've started to improve, we just get put into harder lobbies. One way this could very easily be fixed is to give people a rank or some small indication of their skill level. If they did this, you'd know that even if your KD and win rate were staying the same, you're just facing harder opponents rather than staying at the same skill. The best way I've found to counteract this issue is to use third-party websites like SPMM Warzone, which gives rankings to the lobbies that you get into. The website can give you some peace of mind that actually yes you are getting better, but you're just having to fight harder enemies. I'll put the link to the website down in the description if you want to check it out. This being said, whilst KD is definitely not everything, it sure doesn't hurt to improve it, as it's going to mean that you're going to be winning more gunfights, dying less, and hopefully getting more wins during the process. To improve your KD, there are 3 areas where you'll need to improve: your gun skill, movement, and positioning. By improving in each of these areas, you'll see your KD rise organically over time. Before getting into individual tips on how to improve in each of these areas, I just want to see what order you would put these categories in, from most important to least, when it comes to improving your KD. I'll give you a couple of seconds to put your answer in the comments. For me, and this may be a little controversial, I actually think gun skill is by far the least important skill of these 3, with positioning being the most important. Of course, you still need a decent level of gun skill, and hitting your shots can get you out of sticky situations, but if your positioning is correct, you wouldn't be in nearly as many of those situations to start with. Whenever you get into a gunfight, whether you win or lose is dependent on not only how many shots that you hit, but also how many times the enemy player hits you. Say you're in a position where you have the high ground or a significant amount of cover and your opponent's out in an open field. You should easily be able to beat them, even if they have better aim than you. Firstly, they'll only have a quarter of your body to aim at, and even if they are close to eliminating you, you can duck behind cover to replate. And secondly, you can control the fight. You have the cover, so you can choose when to peek out on which side of the cover you want to appear from, whereas the player out in the open either has to try and run for cover, or you'll get free shots on them as they run, or they're just going to have to try and guess exactly when and where you're going to peek out from. By positionally outplaying your opponent and controlling the fight, you can make up for any difference in gun skill. Positioning gets even more important if you're in situations with multiple enemies, as yeah, your aim may win you the first fight, but if you take even half damage when the second or third person pushes you, even amazing gun skill won't save you. Well, unless you're comfortable quickscope headshotting a whole team, I suppose. After positioning, I found movement to be the second most important way to improve your KD. Again, whenever you get into a gunfight, whether you win or lose is dependent on not only how many shots that you hit, but also how many times the enemy player hits you. By improving your movement, you can not only make it a lot harder for the enemy players to track and hit you consistently, but you'll also give yourself a chance to make up for poor positioning by quickly getting over to solid cover or out of your enemy's line of sight. Much like the situation with cover, if you're moving around and your opponent is just standing dead still, there should only ever be one winner in a fight. When you start to use drop or jump shots during fights, it can throw off your aim a bit, but once you've learned how these movements feel, you'll be able to adjust your aim accordingly. By using these kinds of movements, you're again controlling the fight, as you know exactly what you're planning to do, so you can correct your aim during the movement, whereas your opponent has to first react to what you're doing, then adjust their aim, giving you a split second to take the fight away from them. Now we've got some background, let's focus on some simple tips to actually improve these areas of our game. So first up, we're going to talk about positioning. Positioning is very dependent on the specific situation that you're in, but by following a few easy steps, you'll be able to work out exactly where the best position is in any situation. The most important thing to consider is cover. As you're moving around the map, you always need to know where your nearest cover is, and make a mental plan of how to get there as quickly as possible if you do end up getting shot. By already having this plan in your head, you only have to react to getting shot, rather than react, look around, come up with a plan, then move, by which time an accurate enemy should already have taken you out. Once you're in cover, you can control the fight as you get to choose when and where you peek from. If you mix up which side you pop out from and leave random amounts of time between your peeks, it's almost impossible for the opponent to be able to predict and pre-aim where you're going to be popping up from. A more advanced tip for using cover effectively is to take advantage of the game's right-hand peek mechanic. By peeking from the right side of cover, you'll have to reveal less of your body to be able to see your opponent, whereas if you peek from the left side, they'll be able to see you before you can see them. This being said, you'll still need to mix it up and not play too predictably. Of course, sometimes you'll have no option but to cross wide open areas with little to no cover, and in this situation you're just going to have to hope your aim is a lot better than your opponent's, as your only option is to stand and fight. To minimise the number of times you get into these types of situations, either try and use vehicles to quickly move across open areas, and the vehicle handily doubles up as portable cover, or plan your route carefully to either avoid these kinds of areas, or rotate into zone well before it starts to push you, as an enemy player is much more likely to be gatekeeping the edge of zone rather than the middle of it. This brings us nicely on to being that person who gatekeeps the edge of zone, and power positions in general. If you can find a power position right on the edge of a new zone, you'll easily be able to pick off anyone being forced to move towards you through an open field by the gas. An ideal power position is an area where you have height on your opponent, cover from all angles apart from the one that you're watching, and only have one or at most two routes up to your position, so if you do hear an enemy pushing you, you'll know exactly where they're coming from. The most common power positions are buildings, but hilly terrain and rocky formations can also be used if you plan on moving on after a kill or two. Make sure to watch your back in these situations, especially if you're making a lot of noise. As well as giving you the opportunity to get easy kills, these positions also mean that if you get sniped, you'll definitely have cover to self-revive and get back into the fight. By using these tips, you'll find yourself in much better positions whilst you're engaging in fights, and you should die a lot less running out in the open. Also remember, if you do see someone in a power position and they don't spot you, you don't have to engage with them right away. Try and sneak to a spot to surprise them, or if they do spot you, use your movement to get better cover and escape, as you don't want to be getting into fights with the odds stacked against you. Speaking of movement, let's get into some tips to help you get out of sticky situations and confuse your opponents. There are 3 main advanced movements you can use during gunfights: jump shots, drop shots, and slide cancelling. In long range fights where these moves aren't practical, something as simple as strafing as you shoot will make it so much harder for your opponent to hit you. In general, I like to use jump shots either in close range situations, making me a hard target to track, or to jump out from behind cover if a sniper is scoped in on my position. By jumping out far away from where the sniper is aiming, you should have enough time to scope in on them, hit a couple of shots, flinch their aim up. This will make it much harder for them to headshot you. Drop shotting is excellent in solos and 1v1 fights, as with one button press you can be down on the floor while still having full control of your aim. In 50-50 fights, drop shots massively increase your chances of winning the fight. And finally, slide cancelling is perfect for getting yourself out of difficult situations, either into cover or round a corner. It can even be used aggressively to push into close quarter situations. It works especially well with shotguns. Although all of these situations are excellent uses of these techniques, you can pretty much mix and match as you see fit, and once you've got them all in your arsenal, your enemies will have a pretty tough time to even hit you. To start using these techniques during gunfights, you first need to get comfortable with using them in less pressurized situations. The best way I've found to learn these movements is to first practice them as you're moving around the Warzone map. During my rotations into zone, I like to practice my slide cancelling and jump shots. Not only does this help you develop muscle memory, but it also makes you significantly harder to hit. If you want to practice your aim whilst using these movements, you can always choose a random tree or rock that you're passing, and just try and track that object as you jump or slide past. Once I feel comfortable enough to use them during a gunfight, I'll jump into Modern Warfare multiplayer and force myself to use them in every fight that I get into. Once you've done this for a few rounds, it'll feel like it's second nature. I prefer to do this in multiplayer rather than Warzone, as there's a lot less pressure on every fight, and if I do make a mistake and die in multiplayer, you respawn in seconds, whereas in Warzone you're out of the action for a few minutes. As well as that, you also just get into a lot more fights during a multiplayer match. If you wanted to, you could do the whole process in a bot lobby, but by incorporating the practice into actual matches, I personally find it more enjoyable, especially when you're practicing the techniques in gunfights, as bots don't quite make the same movements as humans, and you need to not only learn how to do the techniques, but also how to aim and track whilst you're doing them. Just before we get into the tips about Gunskill, if you're enjoying the video, make sure to like, as it helps get the content out there and the channel to grow. If you want more Warzone tips and tricks videos in the future, please consider subscribing. Anyway, let's get on with the tips. The third skill that you're going to need to improve is gun mechanics, more specifically your centering, aiming and tracking. In lots of videos I see people missing out centering when talking about gun skill, but if you don't consider it, you're going to be going into most fights at a disadvantage. When you're moving around the map, you want your crosshair to be aimed or centered at the location where an enemy is most likely to appear. This is important not only when you know an enemy is nearby, but during the whole match, as if you're aimed at the head of an opponent as they surprise you, you only have to press fire rather than having to react to them, then aim at them, then fire. This is why it can sometimes feel like you instantly get deleted as you round a corner, as your opponent can easily headshot you multiple times without having to adjust their aim. Although, knowing Warzone, half the time it's probably because they're tracking you through the wall, rather than just having excellent centering. To improve your centering, you just have to be conscious of where you're pointing your crosshair and consider where the most likely place an enemy would be able to come from. At first, it will feel weird thinking so much about your crosshair placement, but once you've got into the good habit, it will just become second nature. You'll do it subconsciously. For the fastest improvement, I just jump into a multiplayer game, as you'll get into a lot more fights this way. But by thinking about it during a game of Warzone, you can definitely see improvements too. Now we've got centering down, let's talk about your aim and tracking. Just to clarify, when I say aim, I'm talking about getting your crosshair onto your opponent, whereas tracking is just keeping it on them after that. Ideally, you want to be making the smallest corrections possible to get your aim onto your target, as the faster that you do this, the faster that you can shoot them. This is why centering is so important, as if you're looking at their feet, it takes significantly more time to get your crosshair up to head level than if you're already aiming there. Sadly, to actually improve your aim and tracking, there's not much you can do other than put in hard work, either in an aim trainer, multiplayer, or bot lobbies. You can slowly improve by just playing Warzone matches, but as you don't get into tons of fights during a match, it's going to be slow going. In Warzone, fights range from super close range to extremely long distances. If you're looking to improve in close quarters, multiplayer is perfect, but for improving your tracking at longer ranges, jumping into a bot lobby on a large map is easiest. This is another reason why I prefer working on both movement and positioning before Gunskill, as you can make much quicker gains in both of these areas rather than having to grind out aiming practice every day, which not everyone's got time for. There obviously will get to a point where you'll have to work seriously on your aim to get to the next level, but you'll see much quicker improvements to your KD and overall gameplay by focusing on the other two first. To conclude the video, let's quickly go over the main points. To improve your KD, you need to focus on improving your positioning, movement, and gun skill, in that order. Whenever you're in a fight, remember if you aren't in cover, you should be moving, and if your movement isn't enough, you better hope your aim is better than your opponent's. Make sure to like the video if you found it helpful, and for more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe. And remember, your KD will get better as you improve at the game, so don't worry too much about it. Thanks for watching!